The metal walls shook as red lights flashed across the hallway. Alarms screamed through the alien ship like a dying beast. But she didn't stop running. Her bare feet hit the cold floor, fast and silent. Behind her, loud alien voices shouted in a language she hated. She didn't need to understand it to know what they were saying. Stop her, catch her, punish her. 10 years. 10 long years in chains. 10 years of fear, pain, and silence. But now, she was free. Or at least she was trying to be. Her name was Sarah. Or maybe it had been once. They had taken even that from her. On the ship, she was nothing more than Subject 43. A number, an object, a test. But tonight something changed. It had started with a small power failure. Just a few seconds. Lights blinked, security gates unlocked, guards moved, and Sarah ran. She had waited for this moment, planned it in her mind every night. Every shock they gave her, every scar on her skin, was fuel for her escape. As she turned a corner, she slipped behind a wall panel, a place she found months ago during cleaning duty. It was tight, dark, and full of wires. But it hit her. She took a breath. Her heart was beating too fast. They were close. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway. Alien shadows passed by, but they didn't see her. When they were gone, she moved, again. Through maintenance shafts, broken tunnels, and forgotten rooms, she crawled. Her hands bled, her legs ached, but her mind burned with only one word: freedom. She reached the ship's lower hangar. There it was, the small scout pod. Just big enough for one person. It was old and rusty, not meant to travel far, but she didn't care. She climbed in, fingers shaking as she copied what she had seen guards do. Buttons, switches, ignition. The pod came alive with a low hum. Then, a scream. An alien had seen her. Too late. Sarah slammed the launch button. The pod blasted out of the hangar into open space. The force pushed her back into her seat. Outside the window, stars blurred into long streaks of light. She didn't cheer. She didn't cry. Not yet. Because something was wrong. Flashing red lights inside the pod. Damage warning. Her launch had been too fast. Fuel was leaking. The pod spun slightly. Control systems were failing. She looked at the map. The ship's computer showed only one planet nearby. Earth, the pod said in a soft voice. Sarah stared. Earth. It had been so long. She didn't know if it was still real, if it was safe, if humans were even alive anymore. But she had no choice. She pressed the auto-landing button and closed her eyes. The pod shook. Fire lit up the window as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Metal screamed around her. She felt heat, pressure, fear. Then, blackness, silence, cold. She opened her eyes slowly. Her head hurt. Her mouth was dry. Something soft was under her. Bed. Sarah sat up fast. Pain shot through her side. She looked around. Wooden walls. A small room. Fire in a corner stove. Soft light. This wasn't the pod. It wasn't the alien ship either. A cabin, and then she saw him. A man. He sat in a chair near the door watching her. Human, gray beard, calm eyes. Not afraid. Not angry. Sarah backed up on the bed. Her hands shook. It's okay, he said in a quiet voice. You're safe now. Safe? No. That couldn't be true. She didn't believe in safety. Not anymore. She looked around. No chains. No cold metal. No alien sounds. Just warmth. Silence. And a stranger. Sarah didn't speak. Her voice was broken, unused. She just stared. The man stood up slowly. You were in a crash, he said. I found your pod in the forest. Brought you here. You've been asleep for 2 days. He placed something on the table. Food. Warm. Soup. Bread. Water. Then, he walked out, closing the door behind him. Sarah didn't move for a long time. Then slowly she touched the bread, lifted the water to her lips. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, not even from pain, but from something she hadn't felt in 10 years. Hope. The stranger's cabin. The door creaked softly as the old man stepped outside, leaving her alone. Sarah sat still, frozen on the edge of the bed. Not because she was tired, not because she was weak, but because she didn't trust this place or him. For 10 years, trust had meant pain. Trust had meant chains, collars, electric shocks, and words she didn't understand shouted in anger. The aliens didn't need a reason. They hurt her because they could. But here, there were no chains. A wooden room. Warm fire. Food on the table. Too perfect, too safe, too strange. She stood slowly. Her legs were weak but working. She walked to the window and peeked outside. Trees. Snow. A small cabin in the middle of a forest. No towers. No patrols. No walls. It didn't feel real. She turned and looked at the food. The smell made her stomach twist. She hadn't eaten real food in so long. The aliens fed her gray paste, always cold, always tasteless. But this was warm. She picked up the spoon with shaking fingers, just one bite, then two. Soon, the bowl was empty. She hated that she cried, hated how the tears burned down her face, but she couldn't stop. Her body had been starved for so long, not just of food, but of care. Outside, the old man chopped wood. He didn't look at the window, didn't try to come back inside. He was careful. He had seen fear like hers before. Not exactly like this. Never from someone who fell from the sky in a broken pod. But close. War had taught him how to recognize pain. His name was David. Once a soldier. Now just a man in the year. Woods trying to forget things. But then he found the pod. At first he thought it was a meteor. Then he saw the strange metal, the alien symbols, and then her, covered in burns and bruises, skin like paper, but still breathing. He carried her here, cleaned her wounds, and waited. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she came from, but when she opened her eyes, he saw something broken inside her, and something burning behind it. He would wait. She would talk when she was ready. Inside the cabin, Sarah walked slowly around the room. Everything felt soft, old, worn from time, not sharp, not sterile like the alien labs. A photo sat on a shelf. A younger David in uniform, smiling. Beside him, a woman, smiling too. Both gone now, she guessed. She found clothes folded neatly, near the bed, simple, clean. They weren't hers, but they weren't a uniform either. She put them on slowly. Then she looked at the door. Should she run? But where? The forest outside looked endless, cold, deadly. Her body was still healing, and worse. What if the aliens were still looking for her? They had always said she was special, different, valuable. What if they were coming? That night, David returned with more firewood. He found her sitting at the table, quiet, eyes watching him. He placed the wood near the fire and sat across from her. No questions, no pressure. The silence stretched. Then, her lips moved. What? Is this place? Her voice was dry, cracked. It hurt to speak. He answered gently. My home. Deep in the woods. Far from towns. Far from trouble. She nodded slowly. You live alone? Yes. Many years now. She stared at the flames, then whispered, Why help me? He paused, then said, Because someone once helped me when I had nothing left, and because you looked like you needed it. Her eyes filled with tears again. She hated how weak she felt. You're safe here, he said. No one knows you're here, and no one will find you unless you want to be found. Safe, That word, again. She didn't believe in it. In the middle of the night, she woke with a scream. A nightmare. The same one. Bright lights. Metal needles. Alien voices shouting. She was back on the ship. Cold. Trapped. But no. The wooden ceiling above her brought her back, the soft blanket. The fire still burning. She sat up, heart racing. Then, something outside made her freeze. A sound. Low. Humming, not natural. Not wind. Not animal. A ship. Her eyes widened. She ran to the window. In the sky, far in the distance, a small glowing light passed over the trees. Not a human plane. Not a satellite. It was them. They were looking. Her heart dropped. They didn't forget her. They were coming. Learning to breathe again, the morning light came gently through the cabin windows, painting soft gold on the wooden floor. Birds sang outside. Fire cracked quietly inside. But Sarah was already awake. She hadn't slept much. After seeing that light, in the sky and that alien ship, her body stayed tense like a spring ready to snap. Her heart didn't know peace. Not yet. She had run from them, but she knew what they were. They didn't stop, they didn't forgive, and they didn't lose. Their property, because to them that's all she was, a thing. But now, she was free, and she didn't know what to do with that. David watched her from the doorway. She stood by the window, still as a statue. Eyes on the trees. He brought her tea. She didn't look at him, but she took it. Her hands no longer shook when they touched the cup. Progress, he thought. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He knew war survivors. Knew what it was like to carry stories you couldn't say out loud. So he gave her space. He just sat nearby. Quiet. Present. That mattered more than words. Days passed. Slowly, something inside Sarah began to shift. She walked outside one morning, just for a few steps. Snow crunched under her feet. Sunlight touched her skin. She froze at first, waiting for pain, but nothing came, no shock collar, no electric fence, no alien voice calling her back. She stood in that moment, breathing the cold air, and felt something strange in her chest. Freedom. Real freedom. And it scared her, because when all you've known is fear, peace feels like a lie. That night she asked him a question. Why are you alone? David didn't answer at first. He poured another cup of tea, then sat down. War took too much, he said finally. People I loved, parts of myself. I came out here to forget, to heal. Did it work? Some days, he said with a small smile. Others, not so much. Sarah looked into the fire. I don't remember healing, only surviving. Healing takes time, he said, and safety. She nodded. She wasn't sure she believed in either. But then came the moment that changed everything. It was late evening. Sarah was outside, walking near the edge of the trees. She had started going farther each day, testing the limits, and that's when she saw it. A mark burned into the side of a tree. Alien script. 3 lines. Curved, glowing faintly. Her blood turned cold. They had been here. She ran back to the cabin, breath sharp. David was on the porch. Someone's coming, she said. He didn't ask how she knew. He just nodded and went inside. They had a silent agreement now. He trusted her instincts. Inside, he opened a locked chest. Guns. Old tech. Hunting tools. You know how to use any of these? He asked. Sarah stared at the weapons. Strange. Familiar. She didn't know why, but her hands moved like they remembered. She picked up a rifle, checked it, loaded it. Maybe, she said quietly. David raised an eyebrow. You weren't just a prisoner, were you? Sarah shook her head slowly. They made me more than that. Later, as they sat in the cabin, lights off, weapons ready, Sarah told him part of the truth. They did things to me. Experiments, they called it enhancement, pain. Chemicals, machines in the blood. David listened without interrupting. I survived what others didn't. They said my body was stronger, faster to adapt. But they didn't like that I fought back. So they punished me, kept me caged. But you still escaped. She nodded. I wasn't supposed to. Something changed. Maybe the system failed. Maybe someone helped. That last thought shook her. Someone inside? David looked at her carefully. You think someone let you out? I don't. No. But if that's true, and they'll come to fix their mistake. In the darkness, a sudden noise broke the silence. A hum. Soft. Steady. A drone. Sarah and David jumped to their feet. He pulled the curtain aside just a crack. A small alien probe hovered near the trees. Scanning. Blinking. They stayed low. Quiet. Until it passed. When it was gone, Sarah finally spoke. They're getting closer. David nodded. Then we need a plan. No, she said. We need to fight. He looked at her, surprised. I ran for 10 years. I'm tired of running. Her voice was no longer weak. I have their machines inside me, their tech, their knowledge. And now, I'm going to use it against them. David smiled for the first time in days. Welcome back to the war. Until the wind howled through the forest like a ghost whispering warnings. The trees stood tall and cold, their shadows long under the gray sky. The snow had stopped, but the silence was heavy. Too heavy. Sarah crouched behind a fallen tree, her breath slow, her eyes sharp. Her muscles ached, but her focus never slipped. She could feel them now. Not just fear. Something more. Something inside her. Like a signal. A tension in her blood. They were near. Hours earlier, she and David had found the second drone. It wasn't flying this time. It was buried under snow, blinking softly, damaged. A trail of burns marked the trees nearby. Sarah studied it carefully. The tech was alien, but not unfamiliar. Her fingers touched the core, and the lights pulsed under her skin. David watched in silence. It's tracking something, she said. You? He asked. No, she replied. Me and something else. He frowned. What else? She didn't answer. Not yet. She wasn't sure. Inside the cabin, they made plans. David mapped out the forest paths, old hunting trails. They marked the spots where the drones had passed. Sarah focused on the tech, the nanotech in her veins. The aliens had used it to enhance her reflexes, her healing, her senses. But now, that same tech was reacting to their presence. It buzzed when they got close, pulsed when something was wrong. It had once been a cage. Now maybe it could be a weapon. She only needed to learn how to control it. At sunset, Sarah left alone. David had offered to go, but she refused. She needed to be faster, quieter. Besides, if they came to the cabin, he needed to be there. She followed the trail of static in her blood, a strange tingling feeling that guided her deeper into the trees. The forest was silent. Too silent. And then she saw it. Footprints. Not human. Too wide, too deep. Fresh. Her heart jumped. She crouched, touched the snow. Warm. They had passed minutes ago. She followed slowly. Each step was careful. Quiet. The snow muffled her sound, but she knew how to move like a shadow. And then she heard it. A voice. Not alien. Not English either. A language she knew from the cages, full of sharp sounds and cruel words. She dropped flat to the ground behind a log. Two aliens stood just ahead, wearing dark armor. Their eyes scanned the trees. One of them held a scanner. It blinked red. It was tracking something. Her. But then something strange happened. The scanner turned blue. They looked confused, argued softly, and then turned, walking away. Sarah watched them go, confused. Why didn't they follow the red signal? What did blue mean? She waited 10 minutes before moving again. This time, slower, circling them. Then she saw it. A new figure. Taller. Thinner. Not like the guards. This one moved differently, not searching, not scanning, just standing, watching, from the shadows. And for 1 second, she thought it looked human. Her breath caught. Was it possible? But then it moved and she saw its eyes glow, pale and cold. Not human, but something else. A hybrid? Her head spun. What were they sending after her now? Back at the cabin, David waited by the fire. He kept a rifle across his lap, a flashlight beside him. Every few minutes he checked the windows. The night was darker than usual. Clouds hid the moon. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Then a sound. Not from the forest. From inside the cabin. A soft clicking, like metal tapping wood. He stood slowly. Another sound behind him. He turned fast, rifle raised, but no one was there. Then a voice, soft and strange, from the shadows. You hide her well, but not well enough. A shape lunged. David fired. The blast lit up the room. And something fell hard to the floor. A shadow. Small. Mechanical. A spider drone. Alien tech. It sparked, tried to crawl, then died. David stared at it, breathing hard. They were inside. Now, Sarah returned just before dawn. Her face was pale. Her hands were bleeding, from branches, from running, from fear. She looked at the broken drone on the floor and nodded. They're not hunting me, she said. David looked confused. Then, who? Sarah looked up slowly. They're hunting what's inside me. Human Fight Back the cabin was no longer just a shelter. Now it was a war room. Maps were spread across the table. Old tools, weapons, wires, batteries, and scraps of broken alien tech were scattered everywhere. The fireplace still glowed, but its warmth was swallowed by tension. David sat sharpening a blade with slow, steady strokes. Across from him, Sarah stared at a half-dismantled drone. Neither spoke, not for the last hour, because they already knew what had to be done. 2 days had passed since the spider drone got inside. 2 days of planning, building, preparing. They knew the forest wouldn't protect them much longer. The aliens had found her. They knew her signal, her blood, and they weren't just searching anymore. They were surrounding. Sarah's hands moved, like machines, fast, focused. She rewired the drone's core, connecting its pulse engine to a homemade battery. This will fry any tech within 20 meters, she said quietly. Yours, mine, theirs. David raised an eyebrow. What, about you? She paused. I'll handle it. But she wasn't sure. Something inside her had changed. She could feel it more each day. The nanotech the aliens had forced into her body wasn't just reacting anymore. It was waking up. Her senses were sharper. Her strength was returning faster. When she touched alien metal, it responded. Almost, like it recognized her. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she saw blueprints, systems, control codes, data that didn't belong to her, but it was in her mind now and growing louder. We can't stay here, David finally said. I know, Sarah replied. We lure them. Into a trap, into a grave. That night, Sarah walked into the forest, alone. She wore a thick coat, gloves, goggles, and a backpack full of tech and wire. On her hip was a small EMP bomb. Inside her sleeve, a knife made from salvaged alien alloy, sharp enough to cut steel. She walked for miles, deeper into the woods, until she found the clearing where the drones had landed before. Then she waited, and, within minutes, they came. First the scouts, small, silent, flying just above the trees. She let them scan her. Didn't move. Let them think she was defenseless. Then the larger shapes came. Soldiers. Armor, black as oil. Tall, faceless. Alien. But something was different this time. They didn't shout. They didn't charge. They stopped in a half circle and stood still, Then one stepped forward, taller than the rest. Slower, wearing a strange silver helm. His voice was cold but smooth. "You are awake now." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "What do you want?" "To return you to your purpose. I don't belong to you. You never escaped us," he said calmly. "You were allowed to run, part of your test, the final stage, and now, you come home." The words hit her like a storm. Allowed to escape? A test? Her blood burned. "You're lying." "You know I'm not," he said. "You feel it. The power, the voice, the pull. We built it into you." And then, for the first time, she felt it too, a hum in her mind, a whisper, calling her by a name that wasn't Sarah. Subject Zero. But just before the hum could take control, she pressed the trigger in her coat. EMP blast. A shockwave of blue light exploded through the clearing. Drones dropped like flies. Soldier suits sparked, collapsed. The silver-helmed alien staggered, his mask cracking. Sarah screamed, holding her head as the tech inside her screamed back. But she stayed conscious. She fought the pull, and won. David, hidden nearby, watched the blast and ran in fast. Together they dragged 2 fallen alien bodies and 1 damaged drone back to the cabin. They had what they needed now. Answers. Inside, Sarah stared at the alien helm she'd ripped off the commander. The face underneath wasn't fully alien. Not fully human either, hybrid, and it looked familiar. David watched her carefully. "You know him?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "No. But he knows me." Then she looked at the broken drone. It was still sending out faint signals. She connected wires, rerouted power, and suddenly, a voice came through. Recorded. From years ago. Her voice. Day 1412. Test successful. Subject 0 shows full compatibility. Memory wipe scheduled tomorrow. Final phase to begin. Log end. Her hands went cold. David stared. What the hell does that mean? Sarah backed away from the drone, breath trembling. "I wasn't just their prisoner," she whispered. "I worked for them. The truth and the fire." The fire crackled inside the cabin, but the warmth didn't reach Sarah. She sat still, staring at the broken drone in her lap. Her hands weren't moving. Her eyes were wide. She hadn't spoken in almost 10 minutes. The words she'd heard were still echoing in her head. Test successful. Memory wipe scheduled. Final phase to begin. Her voice. Her own voice. Recorded. Calm, professional. Not as a prisoner, but as a scientist, as one of them. David finally broke the silence. "You were part of it?" Sarah didn't look at him. "I don't remember," she whispered. "But that voice, it's mine. The calm, the way I said, subject 0. Like it was someone else, not me. But it was you. Before, they wiped me," she said. "Before they put me in the cage, made me believe I was just another test. They turned you into your own experiment." Outside, snow fell gently over the trees. The forest slept, but inside the cabin everything was burning, not just the firewood, but the past. Sarah stood slowly and walked to the mirror on the wall. She stared at herself. Her face looked human. But what was human now? Was she a machine? A spy? A traitor? "They erased who I was," she said quietly. "Then they tried to make me something else. They failed." "Maybe not," David said. "They built a weapon. But now that weapon thinks for itself." She turned toward him. Her eyes weren't soft anymore. "No," she said. "I'm not their weapon. I'm their mistake." That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she trained. She tested the tech in her body, pushed it to its limits. Speed, reflex, strength. She ran through the woods at night with no light. Her vision adapted. She could see heat, track prints in snow, hear things far away. She practiced with David's tools, then built better ones, faster, sharper, smarter. She hacked the drone core and rebuilt it into a pulse bomb. Small, hidden in a glove. She made darts with nanoacid, explosives that fit in her coat buttons. But more than that, she listened to the whispers. The alien tech still whispered in her blood, in her brain. Blueprints, codes, data. She didn't fight it anymore. She learned from it and slowly began to command it. But fire always comes with a cost. The more she trained, the more memories started to bleed through. Not dreams, fragments. She saw herself in a white lab coat watching people scream inside tanks. She saw a screen with names. Hundreds. All marked terminated. She saw a mirror, with her reflection smiling coldly, and worst of all, she saw the face of a child, crying, begging, and her voice calm, saying, "Begin the test." She woke from that vision in the snow. Hands clawed into the earth, she couldn't breathe. Was that who she really was before the wipe, before the pain, a monster? Back at the cabin, David found her on the floor, eyes empty, skin burning with faint blue light. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. "You're evolving," he said. "You're not what they made. You're what came after." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "How do you fight something when part of it is inside you?" David put a hand on her shoulder. "You don't fight it. You own it." That was the turning point. The moment she stopped hiding. The moment she accepted that she wasn't the same woman who built the cages, and she'd never be her again. She would burn that version out of the world, and everything that came with it. The next day, they found the alien forward post deep in the forest, hidden underground, small, fast built. It was real, and it was active. David stayed on lookout while Sarah crawled through the vents like a shadow. Inside, she saw them. Aliens, working fast, building something, a relay station, a signal tower. They were calling for a retrieval ship, not just for her, for others like her. Sarah froze. If that ship came, it wouldn't just take her. It would take anyone left alive from the early experiments. Even if they didn't remember, there could be more like her. And the aliens wanted them back. She planted explosives across the power lines. 2 in the fuel chamber, 1 in the main console, and just before she left, she dropped her last drone, reprogrammed, into the relay core. It beeped once. Self-destruction initiated. Sarah climbed back out, met David at the tree line, and whispered one word. "Run." The explosion lit the night sky like a second sun. Fire reached the clouds. Metal rained through the trees. The shockwave knocked birds from branches and split old trunks. And somewhere in the burning rubble, the voice of the silver-helmed commander echoed from a half-melted screen. "You cannot destroy." "What you are," to which Sarah whispered back, "I already did." The return. This is the climax, where Sarah no longer runs, no longer questions who she is. She becomes the force the aliens feared she might become. This chapter is longer, more intense, and filled with payoff, liberation, and one final twist. The ship roared as it rose from the cratered snow. It wasn't alien, not anymore. Sarah stood in the pilot's seat, her hand on the console, staring out the windshield at the clouds ahead. David sat behind her, silent, rifle across his lap. Beneath them, the wreckage of the alien relay burned in the forest, smoke rising like a black flag. She had reprogrammed the stolen alien vessel herself. Human systems weren't fast enough. Alien systems weren't safe, so she combined both, like herself. No longer one thing or another. Not prisoner, not soldier, not machine. Something new. "Coordinates locked," said the ship's AI. "Destination, origin facility, orbit sector, K7. Sarah said nothing, but her heart burned. It was time to go back. 10 years ago, Sarah had walked into that same facility in a white coat, a scientist, a volunteer, believing she was helping build a better species. But when she woke up years later in a cage, her own memories buried under cold wires and electric pain, she realized the truth. She wasn't part of the system. She was the prototype. They had taken her mind, her body, her memories, and used them to build more like her. Some died, some vanished, some were still alive. Somewhere in that facility, the ship entered orbit. The planet below was no longer the green, living world it had once been. Now it was metal, smooth, silver, endless. One massive station, a lab the size of a continent, and at its heart, the control tower, where the original Project Zero was born and where she was reborn, tonight. Inside the facility, alarms had already sounded. They knew she was coming, not because she'd tripped any sensor, because they felt her. The network was still partially linked to her tech. They couldn't stop her signal anymore, but they could see it, and they were afraid. For the first time, the guards waited at the gates, armored and silent, until the ship slammed into the ground like a falling god. Dust clouded the air. Metal, cracked, and out of the wreckage, walked Sarah, no longer hiding. Her coat burned at the edges. Her gloves pulsed with blue light. Her eyes glowed faintly, the tech inside her awake, alive, and under control. Behind her, David followed. Older, slower, but no less ready. "You sure about this?" he asked. She nodded once. No more running. They moved through the corridors, like fire through dry grass. Sarah led the way. Her hands moved like code, unlocking doors, disabling traps, hijacking cameras. The aliens hadn't changed the systems much since her time here. Big mistake. The deeper they went, the worse the place felt. Rooms with empty cages, frozen labs, walls stained with memory. David paused at one. Inside, a child, pale, unconscious, wires in his head. "We have to save them," he said. Sarah didn't answer. She was already unlocking the pod, room by room. They found more, others like her, some older, some younger, all broken, all still breathing. Each time, Sarah touched the stasis controls. Each time, the pod opened. And each time, the person inside whispered the same word, "Zero." She shook her head. Not anymore. But the deeper they went, the stronger the resistance. Hybrids, enhanced soldiers, defense drones. They fought hard, but they weren't ready for her. Not this version. With every room, she moved faster. Her strength grew. Not just physical, mental. She was reclaiming every piece of her that they stole. And then finally, they reached the core. The command chamber was cold and quiet. One tall figure waited inside, the silver-helmed alien commander. But now, he wore no helmet. His face was almost human. Sarah stepped forward. He smiled. "You've returned." "I never left," she said. "You just lost control." He tilted his head. "You don't understand. This was never about control. It was about evolution. You kidnapped children, burned cities, erased minds, to build a future. You built a grave," she said, "and now you're going in it." He reached toward the terminal, but she was faster. Her hand shot out. A blade of light formed from her glove and sliced through the air. The console exploded in sparks. The commander screamed. The room shook, and the core began to melt. Outside, the others she'd freed were running now, carrying each other, helping each other. No more test subjects, no more numbers. Just people. Sarah stood in the center of the fire and smoke, her eyes on the stars above through the broken roof. David approached, bleeding, limping, alive. "We have to go," he said. "Not yet." She pulled the last trigger. A signal bomb. One final echo sent through the entire alien network. A message. The experiment is over. Hours later, as the sun rose over a quiet Earth, survivors stepped off the last escape pod. Children. Men. Women. All broken. All beginning again. Sarah stood among them. Not as a weapon, not as a subject, but as their protector. The first one to rise, the last one to fall.